This work of fiction is intended for mature audiences. It contains themes of psychological horror and violence presented in a restrained manner. All characters and events are entirely fictional. The narrative is not intended to glorify or encourage harmful behavior.
I never imagined that my quiet existence as a high school teacher could unravel into a tapestry of terror and ancient mystery. My name is Leah Lovelace, and until recently, my life revolved around lesson plans, respectful nods from teens in the hallways, and solitary evenings spent with books and my Earl Grey tea. But everything changed on the day I discovered I was pregnant, with twins, no less. The revelation was a shock that shattered my once balanced and ordered world. Being young, pretty, and single had already made me the subject of furtive glances and hushed conversations. But this secret, these new lives growing within me, set off a chain reaction that transformed every corridor of my school into a stage for whispered speculations and unfounded gossip. Students and colleagues alike exchanged judgmental looks, their quiet gossip blending with the cool hum of fluorescent lights. I heard them murmur in the break room, "Who could be the father?" Their words were not malicious slurs, but rather careless, uncaring guesses, rumors that festered in a place where judgment and rumors mingled maliciously. Yet, it wasn't merely the whispers of human cruelty that bothered me. That first night after learning my secret, sleep eluded me. I found myself wandering through endless dim corridors in my dreams, pursued by a presence that defied explanation. This being was never fully revealed. It was an amorphous flicker at the edge of my vision, a suggestion of something not quite of this world and time. In the silence of those nightmares, the whisper came, "You are chosen." The words, soft yet impossible to ignore, etched themselves into my mind. I awoke trembling, as if I had crossed a threshold into a realm where the natural and the supernatural playfully mixed. By day, I tried to maintain the facade of normality, standing before a class of inquisitive students whose eyes now held an unsettling blend of curiosity and something else. A curiosity born of rumor, and rumor alone. Every sideways glance in the hallways, every murmur that passed throughout the corridors, deepened my suspicion that I was at the center of something vile and malignant. The school, once a sanctuary of learning and camaraderie, was slowly transforming into a labyrinth of petty gossip and half-spoken incantations. I vividly recall one autumn afternoon in the library. The golden light that filtered through stained glass windows danced on the rows of books, creating an ambiance of peaceful serenity. Yet as I sat at a long table grading papers, I began to sense an unseen observer. Faint footsteps fell between the shelves, a gentle rustling that felt less like the wanderings of a curious student and more like the slow approach of something intent on a silent hunt. I glanced up, but the aisle was empty, save for the shadows. That day, I realized that the rumors were more than mere gossip. They were a prelude to an unearthly ritual that had begun to stir within me. As the days turned into weeks, my physical transformation became impossible to hide with loose clothing. My body, now an obese living testament to the mysterious lives growing inside me, was mirrored by an inner change I could neither explain nor control. The quiet halls of the high school, once resonating with the laughter of learning, now seemed imbued with a subtle menace around every corner. Every corridor, every classroom became a theater for whispers of a presence that lurked just beyond the surface of my awareness. One evening, as twilight faded into a heavy dusk, I remained in my classroom long after the final bell had rung. I was alone with the soft, flickering light of an overhead projector and the muted ramblings of my own thoughts. It was then that I noticed a lone figure lingering at the doorway, a student whose eyes held an intensity that upset and unsettled me. His expression was unreadable, yet his presence was marked by a solemn, hollow need to dissect my situation. "Miss Lovelace," he said quietly, his tone respectful yet imbued with an eerie certainty. "Do you know what they say about you?" His words were measured, as though reciting a line from a forgotten play. I managed a strained smile, but inside I felt a cold knot of dread forming. His question was not one of idle curiosity, it was a subtle declaration that I had become a vessel for something inexplicable, an entity that had long waited in silence for this day. During the following days, the atmosphere at school shifted imperceptibly into something oppressive. The corridors, once abuzz with the chatter of daily life, now murmured with hushed tones and furtive glances. In classroom discussions and in the chatter during lunch breaks, I could sense that my situation was being reinterpreted through a lens of bygone superstition. Every whispered word, every sideways look, hinted at a destiny I had not chosen. The students' discussions took on an almost ritualistic cadence, a series of half-heard phrases that reminded me of seances rather than idle gossip. Late one afternoon, while preparing for the next day's classes in the quiet confines of the school's media center, I heard soft chanting emanating from an unseen corner. There, hidden from the casual view of the passing students, a small group had gathered in a tight circle. Their voices rose and fell in a rhythm that resonated with the cadence of something timeless, a litany that called to mind ancient rites and forgotten deities. I couldn't make out every word, but the overall tone was unmistakable. It was as if they were beckoning an old otherworldly power, one that had latched onto my existence the moment I discovered my pregnancy. I left the room quickly, but the image of those entranced faces and the sound of their hypnotic chant have haunted my waking hours ever since. In that moment, I realized that the presence I sensed in my dreams was no mere hallucination. It was a force that had reached into the very heart of the school, bending the minds of those who were vulnerable to its call. Every day thereafter, my senses became attuned to the slightest hint of its arrival, the way a cold draft brushed past me in a crowded hallway, the faint rustle of voices when I thought I was alone. At home, I began to experience unsettling disturbances. Silhouettes in the corners of rooms seemed to linger a moment too long, and the reflections in mirrors appeared subtly distorted, as though an unseen presence was altering them ever so slightly. Even the gentle creaks of my old wooden floor took on a foreboding quality, each sound a reminder that the boundary between the familiar and the unnatural was thinning. Night after night, sleep became a battleground where my inner fears were laid bare. In my nightmares, I wandered through vast, decaying corridors that stretched into an endless void. The dreamscape was filled with details that were both strangely beautiful and deeply disturbing. Moldy, peeling wallpaper, dimly flickering lanterns, and statues whose eyes seemed to follow my every move. But more unsettling than the scenery was the persistent sensation that I was being watched, always by a presence that lurked just out of my sight. I began recording these apparitions in an old battered leather journal, desperate to piece together their meaning. One recurring vision haunted me with a specific intensity. I found myself in a grand, dimly lit hall, standing before an ancient altar draped in crumbling tapestries. Atop the altar lay two small cradles, their presence inexplicably serene, yet imbued with an air of inevitable dread. I reached out toward them, my hand trembling with anticipation and fear, only for the vision to dissolve into a discord of muffled cries and the sound of shattering glass. I would awaken gasping, the remembrance of that long-forgotten hymn resonating in the silence of the room. It became increasingly clear that my body was not merely nurturing life in the conventional sense. The more the twins grew, the more I felt that they were bound to a destiny weaved within something ancient, an inherited foreboding of sorrow and dark power that had followed me long before I became a teacher. My reflection in the mirror began to betray subtle changes. The once familiar contours of my face now bore ebony lines that seemed to shift on their own, and I would catch fleeting glimpses of a distorted image that did not belong to me, a ghostly overlay that hinted at a presence residing deep within. The isolation I felt was compounded by a growing internal turmoil. I sought solace in conversations with a trusted colleague, a fellow teacher whose concern was evident. Yet every time I tried to explain the inexplicable, those whispers in the dark, the unearthly nightmares, I was met with skepticism. My explanations, as desperate as they were, failed to capture the true horror that gnawed at me. I began to suspect that the very rumors that once stung with the cruelty of human hubris were only the surface of something far more insidious. One rain-drenched evening, as I sat in my modest apartment, the patter of rain against the window blending with the steady beating of my anxious heart, I sensed that the boundary between dream and waking life was crumbling. I sat at my desk, the journal open before me, when I heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper that did not belong to any memory of the past. It was a voice that seemed to emerge from the depths of my own consciousness. Your suffering is the key, and your children's lives are sealed in darkness of time. The words sent a shiver cascading down my spine. I tried to dismiss it as a product of my fraying nerves, yet I could not shake the profound certainty that these murmurs were tied to the growing trepidation within me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, now seemed laden with meaning. I began to wonder if I had been chosen, destined to play a role in an unspeakable ritual far older than any of us could ever imagine. The line between the realm of nightmares and waking world blurred. I began to see signs of the encroaching doom everywhere, in the play of shadows on the walls, in the gentle sway of trees outside my window, and in the quiet, cryptic stares of the students as they moved through the corridors of my school. I was slowly succumbing to a reality where every moment was a prelude to a cosmic unraveling, a slow descent into mayhem and madness. The culmination of my torment came on a night when Mother Nature herself seemed to mourn with me. The storm was a relentless, howling force that battered the hospital walls as I was admitted for delivery. In the stark, antiseptic brightness of the maternity ward, I felt completely alone, each beep of the monitors a cruel counterpoint to the storm raging outside. I was not merely bringing new life into the world, I was at the threshold of releasing a demon that had been gestating long before my first remembered dream. Labor was a torment that transcended physical pain, as if the very act of birth was a cosmic reckoning. The room felt confined, the bright lights an unyielding glare against my growing despair. With each contraction I sensed not only the strain of childbirth, but the awakening of a presence that had been dormant within me. I struggled to remain coherent as I clung to the hope that this moment would herald a new beginning rather than the unmaking of everything I had known. Then came the moment when time itself seemed to pause, a surreal interval between heartbeats when the room was filled not with sound, but with an otherworldly silence. The cry that followed was not the soft wail of a newborn, but a sound that resonated with the sadness and depth of a long-forgotten lament. I watched, heart pounding, as my first twin emerged, its skin a pale, almost luminescent shade that defied natural explanation. Its eyes, deep and reflective, bore an intensity that suggested it had seen both unfathomable beauty and unspeakable acts of horror. No sooner had I begun to comprehend the strange wonder of that first cry than the second twin made its alien appearance, a silent, equally enigmatic presence that seemed to complete a circle of fate. As I cradled these delicate beings, I felt a surge of an all-consuming power. The room, the storm, and even the soft murmurs of the hospital staff faded away as the realization took hold. I had not merely birthed newborns, but had inadvertently become the vessel for an entity older than time. In that charged moment, as I held my twins close, I became aware of a presence manifesting around me, a subtle distortion in the air, like a ripple through the fabric of reality. It was as if the very space had grown heavy with the weight of an unbreakable promise made in a time before memory. I felt it seep into every fiber of my being, a deep and abiding force that whispered, "Your flesh is the cradle of our destiny." I could no longer distinguish my own thoughts from the words of that primordial declaration. The delivery room dissolved into a conflation of sights and sounds, the relentless storm outside, the quiet weeping of those who bore witness, and the inescapable, all-consuming knowledge that my fate was sealed. I had become both the unwilling midwife and the bearer of an unholy curse, a living testament to the darkness that thrives when cruelty, madness, and the unspoken demons of our past converge. Now I write these words in the quiet aftermath of that terrible night, alone in a modest room far removed from the sterile chaos of the hospital and the now silent corridors of my old school. In my arms I cradle my cursed twins, children whose luminous, searching eyes seem to mirror the sorrow and wonder of my own troubled soul. I've come to understand that the whispers which once tormented me were never merely the product of idle gossip. They were fragments of an ancient invocation, an ungodly spell that bound me to a fate both tragic and inevitable. For a long time, I believed that the cruel rumors, the judgmental glances, and the silent accusations of a fearful community were the product of human malice and misunderstanding. In my final, shattering moments of clarity, I recognized that those very murmurs were part of a ritual, a dark incantation passed along through countless generations, feeding on the despair and isolation of those who dared to be different. The unsettling presence that had haunted my dreams was not simply a phantom conjured by my overactive imagination. It was the embodiment of an ancestral enigma that had found its birthplace in every hurtful word and every disparaging glance. In a revelation as profound as it was sorrowful, I recalled a distant fragment of my childhood, a small, unassuming mark on my wrist, once dismissed as a trivial scar. In the quiet recesses of my memory, I understood that this mark was a sigil, a silent testament to a lineage long bound by a secret covenant. I was chosen to carry a quest that was as dark as it was ancient, a legacy that transformed every misfortune and every cruel rumor into a solemn rite of passage. Now, as I gaze into the eyes of my children, I feel the weight of that legacy pressing upon me. I am not merely a teacher or a mother. I have become the living conduit for a mysterious force that transcends mortal comprehension. The supernatural entity that once stalked the corridors of my dreams now courses through every whispered rumor, every gentle murmur of the wind, and every solitary tear I shed in the stillness of the night. I have come to accept that my destiny was sealed long before I ever set foot in that high school. In the aftermath of that fateful delivery, the world seems both achingly familiar and utterly transformed. The rain has softened to a quiet drizzle, and the relentless storm has given way to an eerie calmness. Yet in the deafening silence, I can still discern the sounds of that ancient chant, a reminder that the darkness I carry is eternal. It is a wretched truth that even the strongest hearts cannot escape the destiny of despair woven into the fabric of our existence. I now understand that my suffering was not an accident nor an isolated misfortune. It was part of a much larger plan, a curse handed down through time, cloaked in myth and borne upon the wings of rumor. As I hold my children close and listen to the quiet rhythm of their breathing, I am filled with a grief that has no words. The whispers, the secrets, and the shadows have all conspired to forge my slow demise that is both unyielding and heartbreaking. In this final twist of fate, I find myself at the crossroads of the human and the supernatural. I have become the guardian of a being that, despite its disturbing nature, calls to me with a mournful inevitability, The promise of the ancient incantation, once spoken in hushed tones in darkened corridors, now lives within me, in every tear that falls, and in every silent prayer offered in complete despair. Even now, as I write these final thoughts with a trembling hand, I cannot escape the inevitable truth. I was never meant to be saved. Instead, I was destined to bear the burden of an age-old curse, transforming every whispered rumor into a requiem for lost souls. And in that tragic burden, I find that the true horror lies not in the monstrous visage of my children, but in the irrevocable loss of what it means to be human, stripped of innocence, hope, and the promise of a normal, joyous life. So I remain, forever marked by the embrace of that ancient darkness, a teacher, a mother, and an eternal vessel for a sorrow that even the brightest dawn cannot dispel. In the quiet of this final solitude, I offer one final truth to the indifferent night. I have become the living testament to a curse that will endure long after my tears have faded, a legacy that calls to the hearts of even the most resolute, evoking a stream of tearful regret for the souls that dared to love, to hope, and ultimately to bear the unyielding consequences of an ancient, unholy connotation of evil.
Hello, my Nightmare Obsession fans. We hope you loved this story, and were almost frightened to death, left wanting even more. If so, please share video and our channel link with friends and family, and ask them to subscribe, like, comment, and share with their friends and family too. We really want to create more nightmarish horror stories for you, so please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel now. We would really appreciate it. Thanks so much.